Hi guys, it's Luke from Rower Academy, and today I am really excited about the panel we have. We have Jack, Susie, and Ed Piegza, 3 out of the 4 of this family. I'm excited about this interview because it's going to give us a chance to get a sense of student athlete life in university. It's going to give us a chance to learn about the recruiting process, not only through the eyes of the student athlete, but also through the parents. So I think this will be really valuable. Again, we've got Jack, Susie, and Ed. We're missing Matt. Matt can't be with us. He is currently an active student athlete at the University of Pennsylvania, so he can't be on the show with us. Jack, on the other hand, is a recent graduate of Cornell, can provide us with his experience. And Ed and Susie will also provide a lot of insight when it comes to what it is being a parent of an aspiring student athlete. So guys, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Luke. Good to be here.
So let's just jump right into it, right? We always like to talk about how did we find rowing? How did we get here? So Jack, what was your experience? How did you end up rowing at the San Diego Rowing Club?
Right. So I ended up finding rowing in about my junior year of high school. Before that, I played a lot of other sports competitively, but was really focused on soccer at the time. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, growing up in San Diego, I surfed a lot as well. And I was just kind of over soccer. It was really taking a beating on my body. I'd gotten a couple concussions playing soccer as well. And so my mom signed me up for a Learn to Row camp at San Diego Rowing Club. And for the summer, I did the camp, rowed every day. Mm-hmm. Really enjoyed it. Initially, I thought I would like rowing because it's on the water, kind of like surfing. And then I really realized it was just an awesome competitive outlet where you could really push yourself, mentally and definitely physically. And from there on, rowed basically every day at San Diego Rowing Club.
And so did you enter at the same time with Matt? Did Matt enter after you did? What was the transition like there for Matt?
So I started rowing, as I mentioned, junior year of high school in the fall. And at that time, Matt was a freshman in high school and playing football. And throughout his entire freshman season of football, I was telling him, Matt, you're too smart to play football. You're going to hurt yourself. Come row with me. And at the end of the season, I convinced him to come and row for the winter as cross training. And as it turns out, Matt's bigger and stronger than me and a better rower. So he stuck with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the family is at the San Diego Rowing Club. Mom and Dad, you're seeing your sons engage the sport. They're passionate about the sport. What was that like for you to be drawn into the rowing community for the first time and to experience the rowing community?
Okay, we knew nothing about rowing. So for us, it was all new. Really, I thought, oh no, here's another competitive sport that we're going to have to spend all of our weekends doing. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, rowing venues are much more beautiful than soccer venues, so that was a plus. But we knew nothing about it. So we really went from an empty slate to mm-hmm. diving in deep and learning about rowing, what the kids needed to do to learn about the sport, be good at the sport.
And then what was interesting was, so Jack started, as he said, in the summer before junior year, did it all through the fall of junior year. Matt played football fall of his freshman year, that same time period, then started joining Jack. Then Susie, because she was going down there with the boys and because she's petite and knows how to navigate and loves water and boats, she ended up being pulled into becoming a coxswain for the master's program. And then the 3 of them had all these great conversations over dinner every night about rowing, and I felt left out, so that I started to compete in the master's program too. So we went from the family not knowing even what a rowing show was to all of us being involved in rowing eventually.
And Jack, you joke about it a little bit about the possibility of your brother being injured as a football player, but it's a very real thing. So was it a bit of a relief for the family that we were getting out of football? And that was when the concussion syndrome was really starting to take shape as a conversation and for us to understand it. So was it welcome relief for him to be moving out of football?
Without a doubt. I mean, as his brother, I was really happy to have him, playing something or, engaging in a sport where he's not going to hurt his head and brain. And then I'm sure my parents were way more relieved.
Yeah, because he's a bigger kid, so they kept putting him on the line. And you think, this kid is big, but he's also really smart, and do we want him injured? And so concussions and everything, to go along with that was scary. I mean, with rowing, the only way you're going to get a concussion is if somebody hits you in the head with the oar. And hopefully they don't do that.
That's true. There's less likely to have concussions in rowing, but things happen. Stranger things have happened in rowing. If you've ever seen bump racing in England, that that's the first thing that comes to mind. So you guys, the family's fully involved. You guys are fully involved in high school. Rowing's the thing. The whole family's involved. Jack, you are the oldest. You're starting to understand, I really love this. I want to do this at a competitive institution. I want to do this at the next level in college. And so it comes down to, as your mom said, you've developed a skill set. You have this tool that is going to help be a differentiating factor in establishing yourself as your own unique brand when you apply to college, right? And that's rowing. And you have this great skill set. So in general terms, what was the recruiting process like for you as the first in your family to go through it?
Right. Well, initially very kind of vague and involved just going to my high school bishops and learning from them, like, what the process is like as a student athlete if you want to try and get recruited to go to college, and just learning as much as we could at the time. And then it also involved kind of banging my head against the wall, doing a bunch of 2Ks, trying to get my 2K time a little bit lower. And then started working with you, Luke, a lot more, and really just provided a better broad perspective on the process, what coaches are looking for specifically. And I know that it helped me sort of refocus my effort from the rowing perspective and, stop just putting my head to the ground, ripping 2Ks all the time, and really, focus on what's going to make me faster. How do I get out of the cycle of just, trying to PR, and then, coming up a little short, just always at the same number. How do you really break through that, get to the next hurdle physically and mentally? And so it kind of went from being this big, scary process to a little bit less scary and a little more guided and directed, and sort of a goal with a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And that's, you speak to a lot of different aspects of the recruiting process, and it is a big, scary monster in the sense that it's in rowing, it's very much attached to the scary monster, which is the 2K. And as we all know, you have to be physically, mentally, and emotionally ready if you're going to, as you say, rip a 2K and get to your personal best. And that takes an all-out focus and effort to do it. And it's very difficult to manage that against the timeline that is the recruiting process, right? You were, as you're saying, you're trying to get to the next level, and you are seeing the amount of time that you have left before the, musical chairs of the recruiting process stop. So as I remember the experience, you were kind of down to the wire, and it was kind of, how is this going to go? And then within sort of the last month of things, you just made a decision and you just came through, and we had some really major breakthroughs. So what do you think allowed you to navigate that successfully? Because every high school athlete goes through a dark period of time where they're not PRing, where they're doubting whether or not they should be recruited, where they just can't figure out why they're not advancing. And the burden and the heaviness of the recruiting process is on their shoulders. And yet you still showed up every day. You put the work in, even in the times when it didn't seem like you were progressing. And then as we got close, you just broke right on through. So what kept you mentally focused through that dark time that all high school athletes experience in this process?
Right. Well, I think as a high school athlete, you aren't as like mentally developed as an athlete. You know, you aren't like quite as tough or as sharp, or don't have the as much perspective on just what it takes to become a better rower, a better athlete. And I was working out, every day at San Diego Rowing Club with my team, doing whatever was set up physically. But then what really kind of helped me with basically just become a better racer when I'm on the erg, not to say I'm a good one now, but a little better, was a couple sessions that I think we had where I almost feel like we spent almost half the session just talking about, what a erg workout is, or what like a 2K is when I'm pulling it, and just kind of like building up the confidence in some builder pieces that we were doing at the time, but then even more so thinking about how my mindset is going to be at each point in that 2K, and how I like stay tough and stay composed and know that I'm going to be able to close at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Really just teaching the little voice in my head that, it's going to be okay and you got this.
Yeah.
To your question, when you asked that before Jack answered, I was thinking exactly what he just said about the sessions where I remember coming home from their training with you on several occasions and saying to Susie, when she would ask, how did it go today? How was the session? How was the physiological part of it for the boys? And I remember saying, like, it was amazing. Like, they didn't even row on the machine today. They just talked to Luke the whole time, or the majority of the time. Mm-hmm. And just see, and so they were really, I think, when you talk about what gave Jack sort of that ability to push through at the end, I really think it was two individuals. It was you, and it was Chris Kerber, the head coach at Cornell, because Jack probably had 5 or 6 hour-long conversations with Coach Kerber during the recruiting process, and he kept giving Jack the belief in himself, or articulating the belief that he had in Jack, that Jack could do it, that he could push through to hit what his goals were, so that he could, be ready, to row at the next level, or be desirable to row at the next level. And so having somebody of Coach Kerber's stature investing that amount of time in him, even though the conversations weren't always, Jack, you're doing great. It was, Jack, you're moving along a path and you're doing the right things. Keep doing what you're doing and believe in yourself. And then hearing that also from you was huge. We have a good friend who is a private equity guy, and he always says that he likes to invest in companies whose management have been there and done that. And when you're going through the recruiting process the first time, either as an athlete or as the parents of an athlete, you haven't been there or done that, unless you are parents who have been there and done that, and neither one of us had. And so it was completely a black box to us. So having the benefit of access to you, because you've been there and done that at the highest level, that was tremendously helpful. And then for him, hearing it also from Coach Kerber, he was getting like 2 positive things in his head, when the other part of his head was, all of the natural nervousness and self-doubt that you have as a high school athlete, or any athlete, I imagine.
And the parents during that junior year, when all this stuff is happening for these kids, they're taking their SATs and ACTs and really prepping hard on that. They're spending a lot of time at that. Mm-hmm. School is demanding. Jack had mentioned the private school where he went to high school. They did have, college counselors available to them, but they're not really as well versed on rowing. They know a lot about football, baseball, basketball, soccer, but rowing is a little bit of a black box for them. So we really had to look for resources outside of the mainstream ways of prepping for something. And that's where I know, working with you, I know you're called Rower Academy. I think it actually could be Rower and Parent Therapy because we actually had to learn a lot about this process. It is, you had mentioned like musical chairs. You know the clock is ticking. You know your child needs to have a certain GPA, SAT, ACT to even be considered, but then they also have to have a really good ERG score. And how do you balance that? Because they only have a limited amount of time. They do need to sleep and eat. So how do you make that happen for them? And that's where, although we had two completely different recruiting processes with each boy, one's a lightweight, one's a heavyweight, one was lightly recruited, one was heavily recruited, having that ability to go back to the basics and you know, in this case, check in with you and say, this is what's happening. You know, does this make sense? And having that advice was beyond just the physical goals that each boy had set out. Having the ability to have a sounding board was, you know, invaluable.
Yeah, well, guys, thank you for that. Really, thank you. Jack, going back to what you're talking about, what the whole family's talking about, the mental side of things is very, very important. I think Jackie hit the nail on the head that as a high school athlete, you're not quite as mature and developed. It's not suggesting that you're immature as a high school athlete. It's just you haven't really refined the process. And one of the things that's very interesting that you note as one of the reasons you broke through and your 2K improved was actually the mental aspect. And one of the things we've always talked about, and you guys know, is that the rowing stroke is a reflection of your state of mind, right? If you are confident in yourself, you're going to row with these long, drawn out, strong, greatly accelerated strokes. If there's any hint of doubt, things are going to get shorter and choppier and nervous and tense. And so it's real. I think you've really hit a very important note in your comments that it's not just the physical journey that's happening in high school. It's also an emotional one. It's a mental one. And it's one of learning to back yourself and to have confidence and learning not to live and die by the results every single day and to keep showing up to push through. So I think that's great. And that's a great segue. You know, Jack, we talked the recruiting process as a student athlete. Parents, you guys, you know, Ed and Susie, you are so supportive of your children, which is so vitally necessary in this process. But we can't do it for them, right? It's that feeling of like, this is what we want. Like we want the very best opportunity for our children, but we can't do it for them. So what was that like in the recruiting process to be experiencing alongside, you know, at first Jack and then with Matt, the ups, the downs, the you know, small victories, the crushing defeats where it's just sort of this, you know, up and down process. What was that like for you to be witness to that when you see just how badly they want it and it's maybe it's going to happen, maybe it's not? How do we navigate this? What is that like as parents?
Well, what I know, part of the time we probably drove them crazy because we're like, well, just go faster. Like just do another 2K and just go faster. Like you're only talking seconds, just go faster. And I think that was something that we had to understand, that what they were doing was really, you know, physically grueling. And you can't just say, well, just do another 2K like later this week and, you know, be faster. It's just not going to happen. I think we you know, try to be supportive throughout the process. You know, we tried to line up all the resources for them, but it was really, they had to have, you know, the grit to follow through on this stuff. And so from our standpoint, we knew the clock was ticking. It was, you know, difficult with each boy separately, where, you know, for Matt, he was talking to a whole bunch of coaches. He knew from Jack the physical load that he needed. And with Matt, it was, you know, 5 different official visits offered to him. He went on 4 of those. He was planning out while he still had to be going to school. And this was, we were on the West Coast, most of the schools were East Coast schools. So he's flying cross country. It's, you know, you're not sure where they're going to end up, and will that school be a really good fit for them? And then have a program that's going to be supportive and help them to grow as individuals, because they are students and athletes, not just athletes. So
I agree with everything that Susie was saying, and I would add to that, you know, as you well know, Luke, you have to, whatever you do in life, you're going to be more successful at it if you truly love it, right? And so as a parent, what I would advise other parents to do is, like, force yourself to take a step back, and it can't be what you want for your kid. By the time they're high school athletes, the cake is baked. They are who they are. And so if they love something, they're likely going to be more passionate about that thing and then devote more time and more energy and more effort to that thing. And because they're doing all those things, they're likely to be more successful at it. And so if you're a parent of a high school rower and, if it's 8 o'clock at night and you walk by their room and, they're, on the phone talking to their, friends or teammates about, who were the stroke seat and bow seat of the 2004 gold medal boat, or if they're watching, a replay of the 2015, ladies plate final at Henley, don't walk in and say, hey, stop what you're doing, get back to your homework. What they're probably doing is they're taking a little break because these kids are so heavily programmed. And number two, they're evidencing this passion that they have for the sport, which we all know they're going to need to make it through high school, to make it through the college recruiting process, and then to stick with it when they get to college, because you should not want your kid to want to row and be recruited only to get into a school. You should want your kid to have a passion for it so that when they get to college, the volume of workload is so high that they thrive off of that, even though it's so heavy.
And Luke, I was going to mention one thing. One thing I would change as a parent is I would be less worried about, is my son going to be stroke seat of this boat in some random regatta? Because there's random Christmas regattas or some kind of small time regatta where I was like, what if he isn't the seat that he should be in? And there's a little bit of anxiety on, is my son going to be showcased? We really figured out that yes, those regattas are nice, and if you make it to out of regionals, nationals, what have you, that's a nice thing to do. But really, it was the SAT and ACT, GPA, and the 2K that caught the coach's attention. And then you could use this other stuff as saying like evidence that I'm a good teammate or whatever. But really, it was back to get your 3 numbers right.
Yeah, those random regattas that Susie's referencing are more like the icing on the cake. They're not the cake.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you guys have touched on some really great stuff and sort of pulling it together, passion, fit. I mean, those are important things, right? You want your children to be passionate about whatever it is they're pursuing in life. And that was something my parents instilled in us growing up. We don't care what you do, but we want you to be passionate about it. And it's been the most rewarding and most maddening thing in the pursuit of that in my life. But rowing is my passion, and it's taken on a bunch of different forms. So once your children find that passion, it is about stoking that fire, right? And fueling that fire with the intention. And I love that you guys are saying this, it's about the right fit, right? And we've had conversations before, and you never want your children reduced to a soundbite, right? The soundbite of, Timmy just got home from such and such, and they kind of university drop, and it comes down to fit. And I feel that Jack and Matt ended up exactly where they should be, right? And I ended up exactly where I should be, which was Cal. And so we really push fueling the fire and then finding the right fit, right? And as you accurately state, the faster the ERG score and then the higher the GPA, SAT, ACT, the more conversations you're going to have, the greater chance that you're going to find that fit. And this is one of my favorite stories because it's a true story. I do remember standing in front of these 2 young men, these 2 high schoolers, in front of Jack and Matt, and they're listening to everything I have to say. And they're in front of the 2 of you, and you're standing behind your sons. And I can see you, but they can't see you because all of us are facing the same direction. And I don't remember what I said, but I remember the 2 of you at the same time saying, that's what we said. Telling them, right? And it's that whole concept of you're just mom and dad and you don't know, right? And so I think what you guys did an especially masterful job of is unbeknownst to Jack and Matt, and maybe they found out and maybe they'll find out today, there's a lot of coordination between coaches and families in terms of the parents and coach interaction to keep students steered in the right direction. And my dad still talks about a conversation he had with Steve Gladstone when I was a junior in college. And I had no idea this was going on. But, you know, the support of the family is important. And at the great institutions and the great rowing schools, you'll find coaches understand that. And I know for a fact you had that specifically with Coach Kerber at Cornell, and the support that he offers, not just the student athlete, but the family. And he understands, you know, how it all works together. So I think that's really amazing. And it's great segue now, because Jack, let's go to what is it to study and row at the Ivy League? How hard is it? How hard is it to balance an Ivy League education and to row at the level and with the demand that you have rowing for a powerhouse program like the lightweight program at Cornell? What's that like?
It's definitely a lot of workload, and you probably have a longer day than the average college student, but it was an incredible experience, and I'm really grateful to have been able to, be a student athlete at Cornell. I would say that going back to what you said about fit, it really helped to have a coach who prioritized academics, and then a team and a culture that was, my teammates were very smart, which definitely elevated me academically, because they aren't slacking off, so I can't either. I don't want to be the guy on the team bringing the GPA down and going to the coach's office to show him my schedule and when I'm going to study. But then also a team that really, really wanted to win and wouldn't let you slack off athletically either. If you aren't doing those extra workouts, your teammates would know, and you'd be going slow. So it was awesome. It was kind of difficult sometimes, but really rewarding. And I think that studying made my rowing, or academics made my rowing better, because rowing was a release and a total escape from schoolwork and from everything going on top of the hill at school. And then rowing made my academics better, because I had such a structured schedule. I couldn't stay up till 2 a.m. every night, or, go to every single party as much as I might have wanted to, because I had morning practice. So they really complemented each other well, and probably got me through college better.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you that very question, because I remember being a freshman in college and looking around and feeling like, okay, I've got this pressure cooker, this schedule, but it keeps me regimented. And exactly like you said, it sort of balances the other. And I watched a lot of the people who lived on my floor in the dorm. They would wake up, go to lectures all day, and then they finish at like 3 or 4. And then I don't know, there was sort of this vacuum where they just sort of disappeared and you didn't know what happened. And then next thing you know, you're like cramming to get everything done, by midnight, by 10:30, by 11, knowing that you have to get up again. And it's at that point that those other students are like, well, maybe I should start writing that paper. Maybe I should start studying. They're up until like 3 or 4. And it seemed kind of chaotic to me, and I couldn't have handled that. So I really enjoyed the structure of it. And I think it led to a better academic experience for me. And if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that as well.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And Luke, can I mention, from just observing Jack, his team had a sense of joy and fun to it too. So they're really physically and mentally pushing themselves, but where it wasn't a grind as much as they were part of a really unique and I'm going to say fun experience, something that we would observe them and think, what a special time for these guys, because they're academically super bright, they're going very fast, and they're having fun together as a group. And I think they built incredible relationships, and it was really fun to see that. And they had an incredible coaching staff who was there to support them. We were on the West Coast. He was on the East Coast, about as far away as he could get from us. And yet he had an adult in his life, actually a couple adults as coaches, who were there to sort of look out after him. They knew if he wasn't feeling well. They knew academically where he was. We never saw his GPA, but the coaches were there to be a sounding board for him.
Well, I think a tremendous amount of pressure off of me and Susie because we knew. So Coach Kerber brought all of the parents of the incoming freshmen together at Teagle Hall on the first day of school when we were dropping Jack off his freshman year. And he said, we're all in this together. You parents, siblings, families, you're all really an important part of the Cornell lightweight family. We're going to need you all. And we've got your sons for 4 years, and it's a process. And we're in this together with them. And so first that, and then knowing that if your GPA or your grades drop below a certain level, as Jack suggested, you had to go into the coach's office. We knew that as long as he was never in the coach's office, he was above that line of demarcation. So it was like, great, we don't have to worry because the coach is not worried about it. And then it was an incredibly challenging academic and athletic environment. But as Susie said, from the coaches down or from the athletes up or together, they found a way to find joy. And this priority of everything that we're doing is trying to be fast in the boat. And so, to Jack's comments about the structure and how they complemented one another, the academics and the athletics, it was like they found a way to have joy and be really fast and academically good. And I think that when a coaching staff can create that environment, and that's something I think for as a parent to be looking at, when you're talking to your kid about their experience talking to a coach, does it sound like the coach has a great time? Do they enjoy what they do? Do they enjoy the environment? When they're talking to other athletes, when they're talking to people who know athletes at different programs, is there a joy in those environments? Because that's going to be key in getting them through their 4 years.
Yeah, I think you guys are speaking to that concept in rowing that it can be hard, it can be fun, and those two things are not mutually exclusive. When you have a hard-charging group of young men or a hard-charging group of young women that are coming together around a common goal, like to win, right? That sort of goal, it can be hard and it can be fun, and bonds can be forged within that environment. And so, Jack, back to you on this. I think all of us will recognize the statement that in high school rowing, there are some of us who want to take our rowing to the next level and row in college. There are a few more of us that row in high school because we think it's fun and it's an interesting sport. And then there are even some of us that are at the rowing club because mom and dad say, you need a sport, you got to get out of this house, you're driving us crazy, right? And so I would say that it's not the majority of athletes that have intentions to row at the collegiate level. And so at the high school level, you're kind of at odds with some of your teammates just sort of mentally and goal wise. Did you have an idea of what it would be when you would get to Cornell and how that would be? And I ask this question because you're aspiring to go beyond high school rowing and you're curious what it is, and you're expecting that when you get to college, you'll be surrounded more like-minded individuals. Did that meet your expectations, exceed your expectations? What was it like to set foot on campus, to walk into that boathouse and look around and go, okay, so I'm a part of this for the next 4 years? What was that? What was that experience?
Right. I mean, it's thrilling to just all of a sudden be the slowest person on a team, going from medaling at national senior year and then showing up on college and being put in a boat with some,
defending national champions,
some walk-ons and, being in the 6th varsity. That's a shock to the system, right? And I think you and I had some talks about this when I came home, either Thanksgiving or winter freshman year, just kind of saying hey, stay the course. it's hard. It's hard now, but it's good that it's hard because it means that you just made it to the next level and you're on a fast team. It would be kind of terrible to show up in college and have it be high school again, where you're the fastest and have to pull people along. You know, it's really nice to have a goal to shoot for and say, hey, these guys have 3 or 4 years of experience, you know, and now they're seniors and can pull me along a little bit, and you just want to do your best to not hold anyone back and catch up and get after them, right?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Ed and Susie, anything else you would say about being the parents in a program like that? You know, what is it to go from being part of the junior rowing club and you guys were very involved and on the board? Like what was it then to become part of the Cornell family and now also the Penn family? What is that like to walk into these environments and go, oh, okay, so yeah, this is a little different than high school rowing. What is it like for the group of parents as well that you've met along the way?
Well, it's incredible to be involved in 2 really phenomenal rowing programs, 2 collegiate programs that we have so much respect for the coaches. So we felt comfortable, and basically, you know, our boys were under their leadership, and to see how well the coaches were taking care of our sons. We definitely in college were not, you know, involved in a day-to-day basis in any way. We are there to support them at regattas, but you know, in high school you feel like you have more of a peer level with a coach. In college, the coaches the coaches rule. We're just there to support them in any way we can, but in no way get involved in what they're doing. We're a great sounding board if our kids, you know, call us. We can say, "Wow, that was great," but you know, we're not going to tell them anything. It's nice to have, you know, professionals guiding them.
I think that a key to success also, Luke, has been, and you touched on it a few minutes ago, and that is having this thread of authenticity of where they want to be, meaning geographically, the type of program, the type of team, the type of course of study. You know, for Jack, he really wanted to study hotel and hospitality management. That was a specialty at Cornell. And so, you know, he had that, and he was able to talk about that authentically with Chris Kerber during the recruiting process and lay out for Coach Kerber why he wanted to be at Cornell, both from the standpoint of an athlete, but also from the standpoint of a student. Equally for Matt, you know, he was able to speak to the coaches at Penn about Wharton and why he wanted to row for Penn. And so he could speak with an authenticity about the course of study, and then also, you know, why he wanted to be an athlete there. And that, I think, having that, you know, sort of that duality or that authenticity throughout who they are as student athletes and being able to articulate that to a coach. And that doesn't mean that anybody else who's watching this should, as a kid, want to go to Cornell or Penn per se. They should want to go where they want to go, and they should know why they want to go there. And then that's just going to make their experience there so much more meaningful, I think. Right?
And let's face it, in rowing you can have injuries. So if you don't like the school where you're attending and you're only doing it for the rowing program, you never know. You could get injured. You might be out for some part of a season, something like that. You have to like where you are, and the school has to make sense for them. So, you know, ideally you go to a school, it's a great fit, the team's a great fit, and everything goes smoothly, but anything can happen. And you have to make sure that you really love that school. Coaching staffs can change. You can get injured. Anything can happen. So it has to be a good fit both ways.
Yeah, and Jack, it was the right fit, right? I mean, obviously you want to row all the way through, but if something were to happen, I mean, you're at what arguably the best hospitality and hotel management school in the country, right? So you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, it was exactly the right fit for me academically, and thankfully also a perfect fit athletically. So I'm really fortunate that, you know, found the fit for me. Kind of And then I'd say that goes for a lot of my teammates as well. You know, Cornell has a great engineering program, and almost half of my team were engineers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really smart kids, wanted the academics that Cornell had to offer, and found the right team as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having on the flip side, one time I hosted a recruit who said that he wanted to come to Cornell and study finance because he watched Wolf of Wall Street and thought that looked cool. So anyone you know, watching this, make sure you actually know why you want to go to a school, and make sure it sounds good too.
Yeah, that's an interesting reason behind wanting to go to Cornell. But so you did row for 4 years, and one last question on this for mom and dad. You send your oldest son across the country. You're in San Diego. Your son's going across the country. I think we know the answer, but could you explain what it is to know that you have a student athlete who is going to be part of a rowing team that is self-policing, a bunch of hard-charging young men that are self-policing with leaders and coaches who also help manage that team and hold certain expectations? Does that make you feel better as parents, you know, sending the oldest child across the country, you know, and feeling like, okay, there's a support network beyond being a student there, you know, that's something that's available? What was that like?
Well, I can think of 3 really specific quick examples on that, Luke. The first is the one that I mentioned earlier, which is on day 1 when it was orientation for Jack freshman year, and Chris Kerber said we had walked him over to Teagle, the athletic facility, and Jack said, okay, bye family. You guys are done now. See you in a year. And Coach Kerber walked out and put his arms metaphorically around all of the parents and said, everybody come in. We need everybody here for this. And so that was really cool. And he went on in that meeting to say, our captains this year, the 2 captains, one, it was a heavily recruited kid who was now a captain as a senior, and the other was a not recruited walk-on who was now a senior, and those were the 2 captains. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, oh my gosh, you know, there's a heavily recruited one and a not recruited one, and they both are captains. Wow, anywhere on the continuum, a kid could end up being, you know, an important contributor in different ways to this program. And as it so happens, you know, Jack ended up as a senior being one of the co-captains of the team. Mm-hmm. But before that, in Eastern sprints of his sophomore year, I was standing along the shores of Lake Piegzas, if I'm pronouncing it right, and Coach Kerber came up to me and he started, you know, we were just talking about racing and whatnot, and then very subtly he started to talk to me about, you know, Jack's first 2 years at Cornell and how those had gone well, but it was time for him to make the progression to being an upperclassman and what the expectations were going to be for him as an upperclassman to be one of the leaders on the team. He had been like a nice follower on the team, contributor, you know, his first 2 years, but now it was the time where they expect, you know, the leaders to step up. And, you know, then, you know, within the next 2 years, he ends up being a captain. So it was like this authentic thread of how Coach Kerber, you know, took the boys through the 4 years. Meanwhile, so Matt goes to Penn, and after the first 2 years of his experience at Penn, the coach who recruited him ended up not staying on after the first 2 years and was replaced by Brian Volpenheim, who was the stroke seat of the 2004 Olympic gold medal boat, as you well know, one of your teammates. And I remember my favorite experience of Matt's in his first year, his junior year at Penn, was in the fall. They had taken a mixed 8 out of 4 upperclassmen and 4 freshmen, and the boat had not rowed well, and it had lost to the other mixed boats. And Matt had called us after that practice to tell us, oh yeah, it was a tough practice today. You know, boat didn't row well, it wasn't set, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, so you know, so what did you do? And he goes, well, we got back to the boathouse, and Coach Volp sent the freshmen in to, you know, go shower and head off to, you know, do their studies and whatnot. And then he told the 4 upperclassmen, of which Matt was one, he said, hey guys, go grab that straight 4 and meet me down by the dock. And so he took him down to the dock and he had them row up the river. And when they turned around, he pulled up next to them in the launch and he said, I just wanted you to remember how much you love rowing. And had them just row back, just, you know, a chill, steady state row back. And I thought, wow, you know, in two different ways, those are coaches that so totally get, you know, the mental side of rowing and being a student athlete and what it takes to move along in the path, right? And also what it takes to put these young men or women in a position to keep that love and passion going.
Yeah, I mean, those are great stories, and I think a lot of these stories you're telling are hallmarks of great programs and great coaches, and one of the things that we often talk about that is a hallmark of these programs, and you touched on it earlier, is mobility. You can be you know, a walk-on guy. You can be in the 6th varsity boat when you start. But the mobility is available to you upward and downward, right? And we've seen that in programs. If you're doing well, you are treated as such. And if you're on the down, you know, if you're on a downward slope, then you can go that way. But you know, you can quickly change it. You can affect your destiny. And I found that in my personal experience and in watching a lot of these programs and learning more about it, it's the programs that honor nobody has a stamped seat. In lower boats, nobody has a stamped seat. In the higher boats, there's nobody with their name on a varsity seat. And everybody has a shot. They can work their way to get a shot at whatever level they can aspire to. So it's great to hear stories that, you know, confirm that. So just really, this is really valuable stuff. I think anybody who's going through this process right now, you know, parents and high schoolers that are watching this are going to learn, okay, this is what it's about. This is what we're aspiring towards, because sometimes it's kind of hard to see the forest through the trees, right? It's hard to see what's the light at the end of the tunnel. I think, Jack, you were saying at the beginning of the conversation. So you successfully navigate that experience. You graduate from Cornell. You have a great rowing experience. You graduate. You have your degree. We call this section Rowing into the Real World. Jack, what is it like to leave college and now enter the real world? And what skill sets did you acquire as a student and as a student athlete that you find yourself using very frequently in the real world? And we ask this question because there's no pro row. You can go to the Olympics, but you're not going to sign a $10 million contract after that for the next year in the professional rowing league. At least not today. We're working on it, right? We got to work on this and aspire towards it. But, you know, it does, rowing ends for everybody at some point in time. So what was it to enter the work world and take those experiences with you, and how are you applying them on the daily? And what are you doing now to give the viewers some insight into your life after rowing in school?
Right. So my assistant coach, Bill Brumstead, used to say that people in the real world are soft. And like generally, I think that's kind of true, because rowing makes you just a lot tougher than anyone who hasn't rowed and hasn't put in the sort of the grind as a student athlete. You know, nothing is going. I'm sure there are a lot of things out there that will compare to a 2K, but in my day to day, I'm not waking up, you know, watching every single meal I eat, thinking about the 2K or the 5K that I'm about to pull at 5 p.m. You know, I found that because of rowing, I am just a lot more comfortable, you know, working however long it takes to complete my job and to try and complete it at a really high level, because, you know, rowing has given me that team mindset where I don't want to throw my boss under the bus. I don't want to throw my coworkers under the bus. You know, I want to pull my weight and make the boat faster, make my team in business better. And yeah, I'd say, and then to kind of circle back, got a little sidetracked there, but now I work in real estate at a company called JLL. I'm an analyst there, and my focus is on hotels, and particularly on the financial advisory side. And yeah, I mean, I think back to rowing every day when I'm at work, and if 2 p.m.'s coming along and it's starting to feel like a long day, or 7 p.m.'s coming along and there's no light at the end of the tunnel, I'm like, well, I've done a lot worse, right? When you're 10 minutes into a 3 by 30 minute steady state, that seems a lot longer than a day at work does. At least
That's true. That's really true.
Yeah, I mean, rowing just makes you tougher than most other people. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And rowing it's a sport of hard edges. It's a sport of wins and losses, and the team owns those wins and losses, right? We often talk about, you don't lose a race and then say, well, I still scored 40 points, or, to use a rowing analogy, oh yeah, we lost, but I still pull 552. Like, no one cares. Your aid either wins or it doesn't win. And so I think it's great that you're able to carry that mentality into the work world. And, I'd agree with you. Not everybody has had that experience. And if I had my way, and I think you guys would agree, rowing would be a mandatory sport in high school. It would be, you'd have to do at least a year of rowing just to understand, all of the life lessons that are available to you in rowing. And it's great to see, athletes like yourself that I've worked with thriving in the business world after thriving in an Ivy League environment and an Ivy League rowing team and a D1 rowing team. So this is great. And I think it's these sorts of conversations that I'm hopeful are very inspiring for the youth athletes out there on the front side of this, trying to figure out, well, what exactly am I doing all this for? Why am I working so hard? What is high school rowing about? And how is this a vehicle to get to where I want to be, to set my course, to set me up for the next 4 years and beyond. So I think that's perfect timing to kind of close things out, guys, with what in this conversation, I'm sure a lot of thoughts have come up. Is there anything we missed? Is there any, you guys have offered such great advice, but is there any last minute advice that you would offer parents or students who are on the front side of this process, working hard to land at the school of their dreams?
I'll go first. I would say listen to Luke.
Stop.
Yeah. Closely followed by do more steady state, and then get good grades, because in the end, rowing didn't necessarily get me into Cornell. It was more my grades and test scores, and then rowing was a nice compliment and a great thing for me to do there. But really, when it comes down to it, like you said, no professional rowing. You need to try and get good grades in high school, get good grades in college, and then apply yourself to, have a good job afterwards.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's perfect. Mom, Dad?
The volume in college is so much heavier than what anybody is, whatever you who is watching right now think you're doing, the volume in college is way heavier than what you think it is. Mm-hmm. And in seeing it through the eyes of both of our boys, so Jack going through it first, and then having that awakening that he talked about, arriving at Cornell and being, congratulations, you are the bow seat of the 6th varsity boat, and having to work his way up. And then he was on the phone all the time to his younger brother, Matthew, saying, Matt, the volume that we did in high school is not nearly what is sufficient to do well in college. It's so much heavier, which then allowed Matt to put in so much more volume in high school. And I can tell you that Matt having those 2 years of that heads up from Jack, of the additional volume, that additional steady state, that's what allowed Matt to be the more heavily recruited one of the two, because he had that heads up from his brother and he put in that volume of steady state. And then the only other thing I would say in closing would be, whether you're going through it with your son or daughter, or you are the athlete who's more lightly recruited or more heavily recruited, there's anxiety regardless. Mm-hmm. There's just anxiety in the process, and that's a totally normal and natural thing. have a sounding board. Find a sounding board. For us, it was you. It is you. But find whomever is going to be that sounding board so that you don't get in your own little sort of echo chamber, of just pinging within your own head or within your own family. It's really helpful to have a sounding board that's outside of yourself and your family.
I guess I'll have the last word. I think focusing on the three main pillars of the recruiting process, which is the GPA, the SAT, ACT score, and the 2K, are really, if we would have gone through this all over again, I think we probably would have a greater focus on that. Going through the recruiting process, one thing we didn't mention is making sure that the commitment you are offering to a school is being reciprocated, because you don't want to be in the situation where you feel like, hey, for sure I'm going to the school, the coach says I'm going to the school, and then you don't have likely letter and things can go. We've seen that happen in other sports where things don't always follow through. So having sort of a strategic process through this trail is important. And then if you can find a really good fit for as a student, I think that at the end of the day, Matt in the Wharton with University of Pennsylvania is the perfect fit, and his coaches are awesome. Jack Cornell ended up being the perfect fit with Coach Kerber and his team. They both found a place that was perfect for them. And gosh, I wish I would have known that when we were going through this, because it did seem like musical chairs. We felt like the time was up, and we were hoping that they would all land in the right spot. But having a little bit of strategy through the process and figuring out, if you focus on those three main pillars, you're going to have more options available to you. And then it's a matter of, does it work also for the coaches and their team?
Great. Guys, this has been, in my mind, this is extremely valuable, extremely valuable. I think anyone who's watching this will benefit greatly. And so, Jack, Susie, Ed, thank you guys so much for your time. I'm going to flash our little banner up here. If you want to find us, we're at roweracademy.com. If you want to contact me directly, it's Luke at Rower Academy. If you're not ready to train with us yet, please follow us on YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're also on Instagram at Rower Academy, so you can find us there. Follow along whenever you're ready. We would love to take you on and work with you at Rower Academy. Guys, thanks again. Really, really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll find another excuse to have you guys on the show again with some other panels. And so again, just thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.